I'm going to do now is I'm going to share my favorite top 10 features of SQL Developer that I think everybody should be using, even in the cloud. So it doesn't matter where you work, where your database exists. These are some features that I think will be useful for you. A couple of words about me. So my name is Heli. I have graduated from University of Helsinki. I have a master's degree at the moment from computer science. I'm currently working on my doctoral studies. I'm doing researching and lecturing, and my areas cover big data, multimodal databases, and schema discovery. And all this is done at the University of Helsinki in Finland. I've been working with Oracle products since 1993, but I've been working on IT since 1990. Anything to do with data and databases, I love it. So that's my area. I'm the CEO for Miracle Finland, Oracle ACE Director, Ambassador for EMEA Oracle User Group Community, speaker and author. I won the Devi for Database Design category 2015, and I have written 2 books. The first one is about database designing and how to do it using SQL Developer Data Modeler. And the other one is something I wrote with 4 other ACE directors, Arup Nanda, Brendan Tierney, Martin Whitlake, and Alex Newton, and it's about SQL and PL SQL. So let's go to the topic. So quite often people ask me, what's the difference between Oracle SQL Developer and Oracle SQL Developer Data Modeler? So they are 2 separate products, but there is also a version of Data Modeler that is integrated in SQL Developer, and that's sometimes giving some kind of confusion. So to see the data structures and objects in the database and to maintain the data itself, use SQL Developer. To design the database and to maintain the data structures, use Data Modeler. And also when you want to design the data architecture, use Data Modeler. So when I do database designing work, I don't use the integrated version, I use the standalone version. So in my computer, I have both the products installed and I use them every day, all the time. So they both have their own functionalities that I need, but you need to be, you have to know what you are using the tool for, and then you are much better. But in this session, we will talk about SQL Developer, and I have 10 plus things I would like to share with you. I was first planning to do some demos, but then I decided not to do it because I'm not sure how the Wi-Fi will handle it, because we already have this webinar going on. So I will not do demos on this presentation. Maybe in the end, if you have some questions. We will talk about useful shortcuts, queries, debugger, compile, export the result set, data modeling, documentation and reports, database copy and diff, schema browser, explain plan, and some other things as well. But let's start with useful shortcuts. So shortcuts are something that makes life easier. They are not a necessity. You can manage your work without shortcuts, but having shortcuts makes it easier. You don't have to press 100 buttons. You just manage pressing 1 or 2. For instance, if I have my query here, my select star from EMP, which is a very amazing query here, to execute this, I can, of course, go and press the green thing here, or I can press Control Enter, or I can just press F9. And of course, my favorite is F9 because I am lazy. I just want to have one button I press and that's done. So if I want to execute this query, I press F9 and that's it. And remember, you don't have to highlight the query. You can just be on this row here and press F9. So it's very simple. So if I want to see more about my table, I press Shift F4 and I get this kind of screen, which shows me all the columns I have in the table. Their data types, are they nullable or not, any default values, what's the column ID, any comments I have in a database. I also see the constraints, grants, statistics, triggers, flashback, dependencies, details, partitions, and many other things here. And this is very useful because you get the whole picture of your table with just pressing Shift F4. So what I did, I'm here. I have my EMP table here. I press the buttons I just mentioned, and this is what I get. Very useful. You don't have to remember any syntax. You don't have to remember anything. Just Shift F4. This is very useful. If there's something that really annoys you, you have to always press several buttons or do something, and you find it very annoying, you can always create your own shortcuts, and you do it in preferences. So in both tools, Data Modeler and SQL Developer, the preferences are the best. So using preferences, you can change the way the tool behaves and how it looks like. And you find the preferences from the Tools menu. And this is the place to add those short keys. But remember the preferences. If you don't remember anything else after this session, remember that preferences will make the difference. And take a careful look with preferences. Each new version of the tool brings new preferences, and it's always good to start checking the preferences first when the new release is announced. By the way, currently the release we have is 17.2. That's the new version in System Oracle has. The year and the quarter, or the quarter. The code templates are very useful sometimes too. So this is also a shortcut. For instance, I have added new SSF here in the end, which says select star from table. So if I don't want to type the whole thing, select star from table, I can just type SSF, and it automatically adds select star from table in my screen. So you can add as many as you want here to make your life easier. Then something about queries. I already mentioned that SQL Developer is for querying the data in database, while as Data Modeler is designing those objects in the database. So while we are querying, I don't always want to ask the database select star. Actually, I never want to do that. That's not a good practice. So I usually want to just select some of the columns from a table. So in my browser here, I have my table customer and the columns that are included in that table. So I just choose those columns I want to, and I drag and drop them to my canvas. It asks me what I want to do. This is, by the way, in Finnish. Don't be shocked. Discount means okay. And I just press OK. And what happens, I will have automatically added the query here. Select the columns I just chose from the table I just chose them from. And I didn't have to do anything else but select the data I wanted from here and drag and drop it here. And I got my query built. Very useful. Something that annoys me a lot before I realized I have a preference was that I had a long SQL query and I got an error saying line 25 error. And I was thinking, what on earth is line 25? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I was thinking, this can't be so hard. And then I realized there's a preference. In line gutter, show line numbers. If you have this set on, the canvas will show you the line numbers and you will immediately see which line is which, and you don't have to count the lines. So if you don't have this enabled yet, please do it now, because this makes life easier. So I have my wonderful query again, and I have pressed my F9 to get the query result. On the bottom here, you see my empt table content. But actually, my end users didn't want to know everything. They just wanted to know the hire date. So I go here and I select the result for hire date. And instead of pressing Ctrl-C, I press Ctrl-Shift-C. Do you know what is that different from the regular Ctrl-C? This is the difference. So when I paste it using Ctrl-V, I get only those dates plus the heading for the data. So here, the result set was the whole content of the table, but I only chose some of the data. Ctrl-Shift-C. See, I didn't select the heading. It comes automatically when I paste it somewhere. So depending what they want to know, I can just change my result to them. Something that often happens to me is that I don't remember actually what was the query that gave me the result. Maybe I got a phone call. Maybe I already deleted the query from here, so I don't I simply don't remember what I was querying. I only know this is the result for something. So I can go here and press this SQL or Control Q for query, and I will see which connection it was and what query. So I see what database I was querying for and with what query. Because sometimes I don't remember either of these. It's good that the tool remembers. I can also see the history. So what kind of queries I've been asking from this tool. And the SQL history can be found from here or by pressing F8. And this is how it shows to me. It shows me all my connections here. When the query was performed, what was the query about, and how long it took. And from here, I can also take the query, I can double click here and take the query and execute it again if it's something that I needed to find again. If it's a long query, I don't want to type again and I already found it from here. So I can just double click here and execute it again. The debugger. So there is no tool that would be good for any kind of programming unless it had a debugger. Debugger is a must. And again, if you don't remember anything else, remember the preferences. There's also preferences for debugger. There's preferences for everything in this tool. So for instance, I can decide here if I want to start the debugging option, run until a breakpoint occurs, step over, step into. Just one example. So these are the things I can change the way the debugger works. Before I can debug, I need to compile for debug. I can set my breakpoints and I can debug. Debugging is with this bug here. It's a cute bug. Definitely worth reading 2 blog posts about it because a lot of things change for debugger on 12.2. So Jeff Smith wrote about how to start the debugger, and Galobalda posted about 12.2 features. So how and what changed in 12.2 related to debugger. So reading these 2 blog posts will give you a lot of information how to start using a debugger. The compile. We just compiled the for the debugger, but we can also compile other things like something that's sometimes annoying to me is that I have a lot of invalid objects in the database and I need to go one by one to compile them, and I don't want to do it. So I right click here in the browser and I say compile invalid, and it compiles me all the invalid objects. Or I can just say compile all. So I have my query and I have my result set. But the problem now is that they didn't ask me for the hire date or for the whole content. They asked me to send it in a different format. Let's say Excel, CSV, JSON, whatever format. And I'm wondering, how do I do it? Do I need to write a program to change this format to another one, or how do I do it? I don't have to do anything else except say here, export. I right click here and I say export. Here I choose the format, what kind of format I want to use. By the way, you can also give the name for the file here. If I choose insert, I will get the insert clause to insert the same data into another table. Whatever I choose here, I can also say the encoding, which is sometimes really needed if you have special characters in your database. And I just chose insert here. I could have chosen JSON, XML, whatever, but I chose insert because I want to insert all this data here to my, let's say my Exa Express Cloud, and I can do it now row by row, or I can just add some of these rows if I want to, but I have the insert clause for adding the data to another database, another table. Again, there are preferences for export as well. you can say what is your preferred format. If you are only using JSON, you can choose JSON here. If you are using a particular encoding, you can choose here that encoding. You can define if you want to have a single file or several files, and you can define what is the directory that these export files will be saved to. Just some examples, but there's plenty more. So I have my data in Excel. There's just a couple of rows, and I would like to add those to my test table. And I'm just wondering, how do I do it? Should I just, I don't know how to do it. So I'm thinking maybe I can just use Control-C, because I already know how to use Control-C and Control-V. So I take my data from Excel using Control-C. I go to SQL Developer. I go to the table I want to insert it, and I add some rows, as many rows as I will be inserting in the table. Then I go on top of these rows and I just press Control-V and see what happens. Those rows I just Control-C from the Excel are now added to my table, and I just press Commit here, and I have those rows inserted. This is very useful if you are building a test data for your tests. Control-C on Excel, add the rows in your table, and Control-V the data, and then commit. And that's it. Rows inserted. I cannot give any presentations without talking about data modeling, because that's my favorite topic, because I don't believe in databases without having designed for the right purpose. I already mentioned to you that I do my database designing work using SQL Developer Data Modeler, but some of the work can be done here as well. The reason I use the standalone version is that it's easier to find all the functionalities I need. Here I have to go to many menus and sub-menus and so on to find the functionalities, and I find it too difficult, so I rather use the standalone version. But all the functionalities are found also in SQL Developer. I can, for instance, define redaction here. I can add or alter the redaction policies, enable or disable them, or I can just completely drop them. What I did here, I right-clicked on the table name on the browser. I can also get the quick DDL. So I have a table emp here. I right-click and I say quick DDL. I can save the DDL to file, worksheet, or clipboard. I can see the indexes. I can define new indexes. I can drop them, and I can maintain all the indexes here as well. But still, I prefer doing all that in Data Modeler to be sure that I have really designed all the indexes for my purposes. I don't want to have extra indexes in a database, and I don't want to have indexes missing in a database either. So I rather have the time to design the indexes as well. But in emergency situation, I can do it here. I can drop, rebuild, rename, whatever an index. So what I did here, I chose the index I'm interested in. I right-click, and then I have all these functionalities I have in this drop-down list here. I can compute statistics and so on. So something that is very useful too is the table model. So I can see how my table is related to other tables. Sorry, I just check if I press wrong. No, here we are. So I can see how my table, so I have chosen orders here. Orders is marked as red. So I see how my orders table is related to other tables in my database. And I see it by selecting this model tab here. This is the same screen you saw earlier already. We were checking the columns earlier, and I explained that you can also see other things related to that table. And one of those other things is this model. So how does it know how my table is related to other tables? Of course, using foreign keys. So if you haven't designed your database to use foreign keys, this tool cannot tell you how the table is related to other tables. So it is definitely worth designing your databases and defining the foreign keys to be able to understand how your data behaves and how your database is structured. But this really gives you a good look how the database looks like. All those reports we have in Data Modeler for the reporting repository. So in Data Modeler, there's two kinds of reports. You can have the reports from the Open Design or from a reporting repository, which is a schema in any Oracle database that you have just imported your designs. We have pre-built reports for those reporting repository data. And the same reports can be also found from SQL Developer. So if you have imported your designs to reporting repository, you can also use SQL Developer to see the data. There's plenty of reports here, and you can add your own ones. So reporting functionality is really good in both Data Modeler and in SQL Developer. So I mentioned you can find all the functionalities for Data Modeler also from SQL Developer, and this is how you do it. From File, you choose Data Modeler, and then you can just open a design that has been saved, or you can save a design that that you're working on now. All the functionalities can be found from here, but as I said, it's harder to find because this is really the tool for the data, not the structures. If I choose to open one of my designs, this is what I see. I have my relational model here. I have the logical model. I can have data flow diagrams and so on and so on. So all those functionalities you need for designing a database can be found from Data Modeler. Documentation and reports. I already mentioned that reporting functionality is very good. And that's a good thing because we really need all kinds of documents and reports to share with the other team members, customers, bosses, whatever. There's a lot of people asking for documentation and for reporting. So I can generate a database documentation. I right click here and select Generate DB Doc. I select the output directory, so where to save this file. I select which columns will be in my report. And I execute my report. I actually chose HTML report, and this is what I got. So I can easily navigate here, see all the tables, views, indexes, different object types. And when I chose table, I can choose the table that I'm interested in. And similar kind of structure, columns, constraints, and so on. So very easily, I was able to build a documentation about my database. The data dictionary. There's a lot of things I need to know about my data dictionary. And before I was using SQL Plus, and I was always remembering, what was the view called and so on. Now I don't have to remember anything anymore. I just go here to all reports, data dictionary reports, and I have, for instance, this one about your database where I see national language support parameters. So I can immediately see that this database, the NLS state language is Finnish, the currency is Finland, language is Finnish, character set, and so on. So I can see everything very easily. I can also see my invalid objects from all objects. So as you see, there's categories here for different kind of reporting. Now I'm in all objects. So there's plenty of different interesting reports. I'm just picking some examples here to show you. So I see I have functions, procedures, types, package bodies that are in invalid stage. And you remember, I can just go and compile all my invalid objects very easily if I need to. There's also reports about database administration. Of course, if I don't have the rights, the privileges for this kind of information, I don't see anything. But now I'm as a DBA, so I see a lot of things. So all the privileges defined in database are valid here too. So there's no shortcuts, just passing the privileges you don't have. So if you have the privileges for these things, you can easily see them from the tool. If you don't have the privileges, you do not see anything. So for instance, my alert log, I want to see what's going in a database. What does my alert log tell me? And I can just choose the alert log from my reports. I have logs in the database and I need to see who's locking my database. So I can go to logs. So see there's cursors, database parameters, and so on. But one of the examples is logs because quite often I need to check the logs. And again, I don't have to remember any syntax. I just go and select this particular report here and I see who's locking my database and how, what kind of logs and to what objects. I can also see the top SQL clauses. So I have top SQL reports, and one of them now what I chose is top SQL by CPU. So I can see which SQL clauses are the top SQL clauses using CPU. For DBAs, there's still something more. I'm sure you're already impressed what I showed you earlier. Those are very good for DBA, but there's also more. To be able to get those DBA functionalities, you need to select DBA from the View menu and create a connection here. You need to have new connections. So the connections you have here are not valid in a DBA. You have to create new connections with the right privileges to be able to see whatever you want to see here. Instance Viewer is my favorite. So the Instance Viewer shows how your instance is doing in colors and in graphs. This is so much easier to follow than just numbers. So here I can immediately see how my instance is doing. First of all, I see this one is 12.1. It's been 3 hours up and so on. So I can get a quick view how it's going. And here I can see how it's doing, what's going on. This is something that is very good functionality. So in 4.2, which was the previous release before the one we have now, so this is already valid in the if you download the latest version, but it came out on 4.2. We also have the top SQL in Instance Viewer. So we have this thing here where we can see which of those SQLs in my instance are the ones consuming more resources. Something I like a lot is database copy and database diff, especially when I'm doing test copies of my database. Let's say I have a database and another team says, we want to have a complete copy of that database for our tests. Can you get that for us? Yes, I can. I just go to Tools, Database Copy. I select the connection that is my source, so which one I want to copy to, and the destination where I want to copy it. So I need to have these connections defined before I can really do it. So here I'm copying from connection Heli to connection Heli 2. I tell the tool what I want to be copying. I want to copy the objects and I want to copy the DDL, and I don't want to replace existing destination objects, and I want to copy the data as well. So there's a lot of things you can define here differently, but this is what I did. This is the basic with the defaults. And again, I'm teaching you Finnish. This seuraava means next, so I'm pressing next. So just to show you that this tool can even speak Finnish, which is amazing. So I got just copied the database Heli to database Heli 2 with all the data and everything. And the next team can start their tests with a fresh database. So, okay, they've been testing for a while now. And they come back to me and they say, actually, we are not sure what we have changed here. Can you tell us what we've been changing? Because we would like to really know if we change, if we added columns or if we added tables or something, because we can't remember. So I can use the database diff to the original database and see how they are different. Or I can go and compare the production database to the test database to see if anything has changed in production or in test. I choose the source, which is the truth, and the destination, which I want to compare to. Again, there are several things I can choose here, but I take the basic one. I take all the defaults. But please pay attention all these things. You can do a lot of things by choosing different options here, but I will only take the basics now. And I say next. Then I can tell the tool if I want to compare all the object types or just some of them. Maybe I don't want to compare packages or functions, procedures, types, sequences, whatever. So I just tell what I want to compare. And this is what I see. So I see exactly what has changed. This yellow triangle means that something has changed. The green plus means that something has been added. So I can say customers underscore test table has been added after my copy, or orders has been added after my copy. And something has been changed to the customer table since my copy. And here I can see how they are different. There's a constraint added here. This is very, very useful for many cases. So copying the database and seeing how two databases are different from each other. The thing it doesn't show here is what has been deleted, but it shows what has been changed and what has been added. So the previous screen showed you the DDL, how the DDL is different. And the script shows me how should I alter the table to make it the same as the changed one. So using this alter table, I can add the constraint that was missing here. So I just chose DDL and script. So if I need to change the other database as the same as the second one, I can just use these alters. And again, there are preferences for differences as well. So I can say that my defaults for difference is this. And again, I can define the directory. This is very important because when you've been doing something, you don't remember where it's been saved, and then you are trying to find the file. If you define here where all these files will be saved, it's much, much easier to find them afterwards. The schema browser. So I right-click here on my connection, the schema browser, and I can see by the object type, the schema owner, the object type, what kind of tables does Heli schema have in my Miracle Cloud Heli database or instance. Or I can see the indexes or the views or whatever. I can find database objects by selecting Find DB Object, right-clicking again on the connection and saying Find DB Objects. So I type here, I want to find anything that has something to do with CUST, and I put the percentage mark here, and it shows me all the objects that has anything to do with CUST. There's one index, 3 tables, and 2 types that has something to do with CUST. This is very useful if you don't exactly remember what was the column called or what was the table called or did I have this or that. So this is sometimes very, very useful to find the missing data. What I often need is the explain plan for my queries. So I can just here press F10 to get my explain plan for the query. And I can set the auto trace with F6 to see how it's handling my query. And let's say how many logical rates or how many consistent gets and so on. So I don't have to remember any syntax or anything. I just have to remember 2 buttons, the F10 for explain plan and the F6 for auto trace, to be able to see how the database is going to handle my query. Not a big surprise, it's doing a full for my select star from EMP, which is a really bad example. So again, the preferences. There are preferences for both auto trace and explain plan. So here I can define what data is shown in the auto trace and what data is shown in the explain plan. Some extra things I wanted to mention before I let you ask questions, if you have any. Of course, not happened to me, but happened to somebody else that has dropped something from the production database, a table maybe. To avoid that, you can define a color for your connection. So let's say all the production databases will have a connection colored red, and everything else can be whatever colors. So you always see that if the connection is red, be careful. So I have defined now for Miracle Cloud Heli connection to be a production connection as red. And I immediately see that this is something I need to be careful with. So I won't do anything harmful in my production accidentally, because I already see that it's production. Another thing people are very afraid of is the licensing and breaking the licensing rules accidentally. This tool is helping you with that as well. So if you're trying to use something that needs a special licensing, it will give you this kind of error message. This is for diagnostic pack. So it says, if you want to continue, make sure you have diagnostic pack license. Of course, it would be very annoying if it's asking me every time, because I do have this license. So in the preferences, under database licensing, I can define here that these connections already have change management pack, these have tuning back, and these have diagnostics pack. So if I have defined here that I have those licenses, it's not giving me that error message anymore, because it knows I have the license. This makes my life much easier, because I have many, many connections and I don't remember who's having what kind of license. The NLS settings can be defined here as well. And mine is, of course, the Finnish settings to show you that it's possible with the Euro sign and everything. So in 4.2, which was the release we got just before 17.2, we had some very interesting features like analytic views. So we had support for 12.2 functionality, analytic views. And we also have reports for those analytic views in the tool. We had the real-time SQL monitor from Tools menu. And again, this is a feature that needs a tuning back. So it's giving this error message if you are trying to use it without the license, or without telling the tool you have the license. And of course, if you have the license, you can continue with this. This is how it shows it, the real-time SQL monitor. It shows you what's going on in the database at the moment. Something that is really useful is resetting the password. So you can just select your connection here, right-click, reset password, define your current password and new password, and confirm the password and say OK, and your password is changed. So you don't have to do it using SQL anymore. This tool is very well supported by a wonderful team from Oracle. And that Jeff Smith is the guy responsible for the tool, and he would be very happy to get any kind of feedback with the tool to make it even better. So if you have any feedback, he is very happy to get it. So please, when you're using the tool and you find something that should be better, or something that is not really working, let him know, because they are really good in fixing things. That's about what I had to tell today. So I will open the question time now. But if you need to contact me, you can contact me by email, heli@miracleoy.fi, or my Twitter handle, Heli from Finland, or my blog, which is helifromfinland.com. I've been mainly blogging about data modeler things, but now that I have been using SQL Developer much, much more, I've been thinking I might need to blog about that too a little bit more. But if you want to read more about SQL Developer, that Jeff Smith's blog is the best place to find information about that. So these are the two blogs I would recommend you to go and check. And now I'm ready to get your questions if you have any. So I believe there is the... Hi.
I basically up to this point we have no questions,
Okay.
but Takada also gave his comment saying very informative. Thank you, Heli.
Thank you.
I will join him on the comment. That was excellent presentation, very informative.
Thank you. I'm glad. Thanks. Okay. But if you don't have any questions, I'll let you continue your evening. I understood you already have evening. I have morning here in Finland, but you have already evening, so you can just continue with your free time.
Thank you
And
so much.
you are so welcome. And if any questions, you will reach me by email, Twitter, or my blog.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Heli. Have an amazing day up front.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye, everybody.